الله أكبر الله أكبر.
He was selfless in many ways. His legacy isn't written down anywhere. It was tough. You don't know what to expect. It's lonely at the top. Islamophobia is part of the discourse. It's been talked about. East London Mosque is a very unique institution, really. I mean, there's nothing like it in the UK. We have to create an environment where we have that kind of continuous growth of people that follow the path. My life has pretty much been defined by Islam and Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
In today's episode, we're talking about British Muslims with our guest, brother Harun Khan. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Nice to have you. Just to get us warmed up, I've got some quick fire questions. Who is your favorite person from history?
SubhanAllah. My children asked me that question.
Really? So you should have an answer.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the natural answer as a Muslim is Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? Everybody says that.
That would be cheating.
If I'm honest with you, I probably haven't really given it thought in that sense, because I think my life has pretty much been defined by Islam and Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So I never really... I know sometimes people ask, who are role models and who do you kind of aspire to? I don't think I've really, if I'm honest, I haven't really aspired to anyone, any individual person. If I was to say who really touched my life, would be my closest friend who passed away, Brother Zakaria Islam. Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners would know him, because I knew him from a young age. And I think his departure affected me quite a lot. And I would say that he was, in a way, a friend, but also a role model in many ways.
Yeah.
So, I would say I get a lot of inspiration from him.
When you're not working, how do you like to spend your time?
That's a good question. Leisure.
Leisure.
So I took up a lot of cycling in recent years, especially during COVID. Alhamdulillah. I mean, it's a big, it's been a big change for me, I think, at my age.
Yeah.
I mean, I rode bikes when I was young.
Yeah.
In fact, I rode my bike in these streets around East London Mosque from a very young age. And then I, through my teenage years, and then I had a massive gap. But now it's become very much the weekend kind of cycling groups and there are a lot of Muslims who are cycling. So I kind of joined different group rides. And I think the most significant one for me was just November 2023, I did the Makkah to Medina ride.
Oh, wow.
Over 4 days. And that's 300 plus miles. And that was an amazing trip. Not just the ride, but the fact I got to do Umrah as well.
So you're almost professional as a rider.
Well, I don't know about not professional.
Because I see you come up on my Facebook feeds and you look like a...
Definitely not professional, but I think I would say experienced in that sense. I really enjoy it. And it's... That's another whole other conversation, right? I think
you're going to have to come back to that one.
But definitely, I think in terms of brotherhood, camaraderie, people supporting each other, so much I've learned. I mean, that ride I did in Makkah to Medina was with a group of people who I've never met before. They were all Muslims from around London and the UK. There was 18 people. I only knew one person. He's the one who took me. He convinced me to go. The others I never met, but they've now become almost like lifelong friends.
Wow.
Because you've done a whole journey with them.
Yeah.
We slept in the same place together. We stayed overnight. We traveled. We rode our bikes. So it was a really great experience.
SubhanAllah, that's amazing. Next question. What's your hidden talent? I know everyone's got one.
SubhanAllah. I don't know. I can't really say myself about hidden talents. If there's one thing that's been probably consistent in different ways, and it will probably come out through the conversation, is having the ability to organize people and events. So bringing people together, collaborating with them, working as a team. Alhamdulillah, that's been quite effective for me in different aspects. And some of it will probably come out in the conversation, which probably led me to where I am and where I got to in terms of my kind of community work.
Okay. Last quick fire question. Biryani or cake?
Biryani.
True Asian, biryani. Good choice. Well, thank you for being here. We want to kind of talk to you about your kind of community activism work, your involvement with the East London Mosque and the MCB and so on. But before I kind of delve into that, what I want to talk about is your father. Your father, rahimahullah, he was a giant in our community, and a lot of uncles and uncles that I've spoken to, they always mention your father. And when people were first coming to the UK, they had no one, and your dad used to help them with lodgings, help them find jobs, help them get set up. And to me, that was like so inspirational. Like, this is someone who, probably would have been struggling themselves, but at the same time, he's helping other people kind of get set up. Tell us a bit about your...
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned it, because actually when I was talking about Zakaria, my father was in my mind.
Yeah.
And now that you've mentioned it, absolutely, I didn't say it off the cuff.
Yeah.
Because it's not something I go on about,
Yeah,
if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But definitely, on reflection, again, he impacted my life, especially with his departure. It was very sudden. So I wrote a post. I wrote a post on Facebook after my mother died in October 2021.
Yeah.
And I kind of, because I'd never said anything about my father, because he passed away more than 20 years ago. And so, this is before the social media kind of thing. And it's not really, his legacy isn't written down anywhere.
Yeah.
And so when I wrote something about my mum, I wrote about my dad at the same time.
Yeah.
And so it was mostly for my friends and followers to understand the loss in terms of not only as a family, but as a community. And similarly, we hear stories like his peers, and I'm sure you'll cover some of those. And it's very true. I mean, I was born and bred locally, just literally 2 streets away from East London Mosque.
Yeah.
And he came to the UK in 1958. He had a reasonable education, so he could read and write English. And he worked, and then eventually he brought my mum and 2 of my sisters. After my mum came, I was born here. And we grew up in an environment where the family home became almost like not bed and breakfast. It was more like a lodgings. He had lots of space, alhamdulillah, and he created rooms for people to stay. So we did have a lot of people in the 70s and 80s, early 80s especially, through that period, renting rooms from my father. They would come, knock on the door, or they would make contact, and he would help them. And then there would be a whole bunch of other people, because they knew through contacts that my father could read and write. They would come to him with applications, immigration forms, welfare forms, all kinds of stuff. And it was literally just, they would turn up and he'd help them, advise them, fill out their forms. There was no, it's just like, it was, I think that's one of the things I inherited from him is the community service aspect, to help people. There was no payment, none of that. In fact, it was the other way around more. That the other bit about my mother was she was constantly cooking food.
It was costing you your family
basically, whether it's tea and coffee or or if they were relatives or well known, they would definitely get lunch and dinner. And obviously the people who rented, they took care of themselves. But some of them were related to me, some of them were distant relatives, some of them were from regions that we knew, and some of them were complete strangers, including one guy I remember really well, who was Hindu. So he rented a room and he stayed there, and it was fine. It wasn't a problem. And I think he was from Goa, from what I remember. I actually spent a lot of time with him, because he was someone who would sit there and he would make lots of trinkets and things. He was a handyman, and I learned maybe some of that tinkering came to me. I don't know. But alhamdulillah, I have to say, I make dua for my father as well, in that sense that a lot of that will be to his benefit, in the hereafter, inshallah, because he was selfless in many ways. He did a lot more, and also in the family side of things, you realize these things when they're gone. He played a major part. He was the most senior person in our family. He was the oldest in amongst his siblings and amongst his extended cousins. And his duty, it was on himself. He felt it was his duty to keep in touch with everyone. So all the aunts, uncles, everybody who was spread around, who arrived over time, settled, He would visit them regularly, keep in touch with them, ask how they were. Everyone I meet, they all say to me how much they miss him.
Yeah.
And how much he did for many of them, because a lot of them came well after him, and he helped all of them settle. Almost all of my immediate first cousins who came to the UK have stayed in my house, lived there, been fed by my mum.
Yeah.
They've then gone on, got married, found their own place, have their own children, but all of them have stayed with us. All my maternal and paternal first cousins have been through our house in that way. When they were single, they arrived, they worked, maybe they worked in a restaurant or they worked somewhere else, but the day off was in our house.
Yeah.
And then eventually they got fixed up, married. Even their marriages were arranged by my parents. So they did an immense amount of work on that side. On the community side, obviously, my dad is in the old black and white photograph in Altabadi Park after the murder of Altabadi. So there was a protest there. In fact, I remember him going to demonstrations, anti-racist demonstrations in the 70s at that time. He was an activist himself in that way. He was quite politically aware, so he always read the newspaper, watched the news all the time. And again, I think some of that rubbed off on me as well, the interest. Because not everyone's interested in this kind of stuff. But he genuinely had interest. He would listen to the radio. When I play Radio 4 now, or World Service, it brings back memories from the time when my father used to play the radio and listen to the radio at night, especially World Service.
Yeah. So it must be like really nostalgic for
it
you.
It is a lot of the time. So alhamdulillah, his contribution was, mashallah, a lot.
So in a sense, I'm getting, it's almost like your dad's community work was an inspiration to you, and you're a continuation of his legacy and what he's kind of did for the community and started. It's a continuation. So tell us about how you got involved with the East London Mosque.
So as I mentioned, I was born locally. I was actually born in Royal London Hospital, which is now the town hall. And I remember coming very early age to East London Mosque when it was just a porter cabin, as many people who know the history and the pictures and the images they'll see. It literally was. And we used to do evening class madrasa in those days. I think probably from the age of 5, 6, started coming here, just like any other young child, really. Still remember being taught by late Haji Taslim Ali as well. So he used to run classes in those days. And then as the years went by, I was obviously very close to the mosque. So this was my local mosque, and it always has been for many, many years. As I got older, in my early teens, I got more involved in the activities of the mosque. So where they needed help, I would volunteer. I would be here. My father was here anyway, helping out. And then I would help out on events and activities. And as I got more older, obviously I was given more responsibility in the mosque. So collections, and also managing crowd control at Eid days.
Okay, so that must have been fun.
It was quite an activity in itself. So especially because obviously every Eid we're at capacity. It always has been. And so there came a point where in the early days, obviously they prayed in one Jamaat maybe, but as the East London Mosque the old building which was built around 1985, once that was built, 4 Jamaats, and there's nowhere to go. So we had to control the crowds who came in and those who left. And that was a real full day activity, really, in those days. So I played a role there as well.
It sounds very similar to what we see now. It's just the scale is...
It hasn't stopped. It hasn't stopped. And then I got involved in more and more activities, really. It's always been as a volunteer. I've never really had any kind of official role in the mosque, never really wanted anything. I was part of the development subcommittee when the LMC was being designed.
Okay.
So that was basically playing a part with the designers and a few committee members in how the LMC should function and the design and layout and everything else. Ultimately, I was given, I think when LMC, the launch day of LMC, London Muslim Centre, 2004.
2004 June. Yeah.
2004 June, I was given the task of heading up the stewarding and security team on that day. It was a huge event.
Yeah.
So it was a Jummah day. It was decided the official opening would be on Jummah. The Jummah was led by the Imam from Makkah.
Yes.
We had around 20,000 people turn up that day. They prayed on the streets. They prayed everywhere. It was all over.
All of Whitechapel was basically
all of the Fieldgate Street, even to the point where the Imam gave a ruling on the day where he allowed people to pray in front of the Imam, because they had spread into, where Maida restaurant is.
Yeah.
That used to be a car park.
Yeah.
They prayed in that car park.
Oh, wow. And that's actually...
beyond the mihrab. Yeah. It's in front of the Imam.
Wow, that's an interesting
Because it
fact.
was just uncontrollable.
Yeah.
And then that same day in the afternoon, we hosted around 500 guests for a reception. The guests were from all walks of life, from the community, but also included multiple ambassadors, politicians, government officials, and royalty, with the reception in the new building in LMC. So we had to oversee the whole event for that day.
It sounds amazing. Obviously, I've seen the pictures, and the crowds were just phenomenal.
It was,
Tell us a bit about your time as Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain. How did you get involved with the MCB, and how did you end up then becoming the Secretary General?
Yeah, there was no big plan. It's just I think in the community aspect, there isn't a plan. I think a lot of the time it's been mostly, for me, it's being involved in something, whether it's the mosque or whether it was MCB. It was, for me, I saw it as something that needed to be done. And Islamically, it was right for me in the sense that I wasn't doing anything wrong. And it's rewarding in the sense that there's benefit to be seen in this life, in the hope that Allah accepts it with a reward in the hereafter. Because it's fi sabilillah.
Yeah.
That's the objective. And with MCB, I think I kind of, again, it was like, because of what I was doing in my kind of extracurricular activities, doing volunteering at the mosque, organising things, I kind of got pulled in with MCB. Initially, it was just, I was part of a committee, which is London Affairs at the time, it was known as, which primarily had a role to work closely with the Mayor of London and City Hall. That's how it started out. Eventually leading to, and you already know this, leading to the first Eid in Trafalgar Square as the major event for Muslims. So I played a key role in delivering that event, working with the Mayor's office for about 4 years. I became chair of London Committee. Obviously, the MCB role, lots of stuff was going on at the time. I then became the treasurer through the electoral process that they have every 2 years. I served as treasurer for 4 years. I did one term as Deputy Secretary General, and then I became Secretary General. Through each successive election. Mostly because I think I contribution, people recognized me, saw, I could do things, and it kind of went that way. And I did kind of grow into the organization in a way as well. To be honest, I never had any aspiration to be Secretary General. I just kind of did what I had to do at the time. And that was the role, and that was the duty. It was a duty, basically. So I had a duty to do, and I fulfilled it. And eventually, when I did become Secretary General, it was a big decision for me, because the election process was quite open, and you have to not campaign, but you have to declare your candidacy so people know. And so I did consult my peers. I consulted my advisors, people I trust, as you should, and get the right advice, and then put your trust in Allah, inshallah, and as best as you can, and so that to see the benefit, because nothing is from me. If I'm going to make it a success, and again, the success isn't for myself, this is a success for the community.
And how was it, once you became Secretary General? It's like, it's big boots to fill. It's a demanding role. You're in the national spotlight, in the press. What did all of that feel like?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, you don't know what to expect. There's one term that came to me quite a lot in my mind, when they talk about, and this is a voluntary role, right? I'm doing a full-time job as well.
Yeah.
And this is a voluntary role.
Yeah.
I'm kind of throwing myself, in front of all these kind of, in front of the media and all these challenges and questioning. And then people think, why? It's like, you're not being paid to do this job.
Yeah.
But one thing that came to me was that, this term they have about CEOs is lonely at the top.
It's lonely at the top.
So I can see what they mean.
Yeah.
Because it's a very, very challenging role. You have to really think, talk to people. You need a lot of people you can trust. You need people close to you that you can consult. You can't take these decisions on your own.
Yeah.
And these are decisions that affect people and our communities.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't work on my own. I had to work closely with a lot of people. Alhamdulillah, there were some good people around. There's some good advisors in the MCB.
Yeah.
And that support network, in addition to the fact my family, I had a family to run and my children were younger then.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, my wife, was amazing through that whole process. To have that moral support throughout played a big part in it. And the task itself was literally 24/7. There are no days off.
Wow.
It's very difficult. You can take days off, but it's very hard to keep things because it's always on your mind. Because now I kind of reflect on it because it's like I've stepped down 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So it seems difficult to comprehend how I had the time to do what I did. And people used to ask me this all the time.
Yeah.
Where do you find the time? Because I was doing a full-time job and everything kind of worked around it, weekends and, evenings, conference calls, phone calls, all kinds of stuff was going on generally. Social media, WhatsApp helped obviously over time. It wasn't there at the beginning, but it was there, through the period. So that kind of pressure on time was quite tough. But alhamdulillah, for me, it was a huge learning experience as well, in my lifetime. So there's no regrets there in that sense. I think when I took the role on, I had some clear objectives and plans and tried my best working with the exec, to fulfill that.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, so it's as good as, I could give really.
Alhamdulillah. Kind of pivoting the conversation really, but following on from your work at the MCB, what do you think have been like key moments in the history of Muslims in the UK that kind of shaped our British Muslim identity? What do you think?
I would say that when you talk about pivotal moments, I think primarily in the early years, for me, like the 70s, the 80s, and probably the early 90s were mostly defined by our experience in challenges of racism and discrimination.
Yeah.
Anti-Muslim hatred, Islamophobia wasn't really something that was spoken about or recognized because we kind of fit the Asian bill. So it wasn't really in the media. I remember the programs we used to see at the time. They were few and far between that were kind of could type as kind of negative portrayal of Muslims in television media. Even in the newspapers, probably not that much in that sense. I would say that post kind of mid-90s, the kind of the discussion, the talk, it changed. The most defining moments I think for everyone is definitely 9/11, 7/7, right? So everyone knows about these things, but that's later on. 2001, so it's just after 97. And even the term Islamophobia was actually coined by Runnymede Trust in their report in 1997. So I would have been 27 around that time. And I probably wasn't really in any kind of political scene, community scene. It was more localized for me. And for us, a lot of the challenges we faced at the time was anti-racism. And the effects of racism on our communities more than anything else. So you had 9/11, 7/7, and I would say subsequently the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, which also led to a whole raft of counter-terror measures that were rolled out by the government of the time, which have had a massive impact on our communities. Disproportionate impact on ethnic minority communities, especially Muslims, and these are the things which are pretty much defining our lives through that period, probably for the last 20 years plus. in one way or another. And Islamophobia obviously is on the discourse now. Without being too negative, there are a lot of positives as well. For me, if I look at it, everybody doesn't see it, and I try to raise it where I can on the positive side in some ways, is some of the work that MCB did. Like, for example, the research on the Muslim census.
Yes.
Sorry, not on the census, but the Muslim statistics that come from the census. For me, I understood the real value of it, starting from the 2001. Now we're into the third one, where we'll get the data for Muslims, and some of it's already come out.
Yes.
Because MCB played a key role before my kind of direct involvement in that way, in securing the religious question in the census. And that was a big part because it gave us numbers. When you go to policymakers, they understand if you can tell them. And the reason I mention it is because we can now see how Muslims as communities and how different ethnic communities have progressed in life, like employment and education. Gives you a sense of pride that we have progressed. We're not going backwards in that sense. If you look at educational attainment, and if it's particularly honed down on Bangladeshi community, we're moving forwards professionally and academically, even with the challenges that we face in terms of deprivation. So that's quite important for us to recognize, and that can be discussed. Policymakers can look at it, and I think, and also we can raise it with policymakers. Where are the issues? What can we achieve? With all those challenges, our community is still able to go forward.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the the testament of our community and the tenacity of individuals and trying to push things forward. Let's talk about identity of Muslims in Britain and the evolution of that. What kind of role do you see the East London Mosque playing in the British Muslim identity, and where do we go from there, where we are today?
Yeah, East London Mosque is a very unique institution, really. There's nothing like it in the UK. There are good mosques around the country, masajid I've visited of quite a few during my time at MCB. There's no question everyone's doing their bit in their community. I think it just feels like the size and scale is one thing. The actual physical building itself is huge. Yeah. But it's not an empty place. It's a thriving place with people and activities. It is definitely a role model mosque for many people around the globe to see when they come. We've had multiple international visitors, people at all walks of life, as I mentioned, and from all levels in society. Everyone recognizes East London Mosque as an institution and what it is. And hence, it has a role to play because it has the capacity and the ability to produce good people. Good people in the sense that talented people who can not only work for the institution, but they can give to society. So I myself say I'm a product of East London Mosque, as in the sense that a lot of the things that I learned, my values, are based from my experiences at East London Mosque. I came here to pray, obviously, but I met people, I learned from people, I was guided by people who were at the East London Mosque.
That brushed off on you.
And that obviously played a big part in who it shaped me. It's an element of who I am. And similarly, there are a number of people, my peers, and also the younger generation. Everyone is influenced by that experience. I don't know if you remember, so MCB's role, we had this thing around Our Mosques, Our Future. So we did 3 conferences when I was there. We did London, Manchester, and Leicester. So the Leicester one was Midlands. We had about 400 participants. And the themes were all around investing in people. Like, it was Our Mosques, Our Future, and it was, I think one of them was people, not buildings. So, just to bring the focus on people. That fundraising and building structures is fine. We need it. We need shelter. We need the cover. keep us warm.
Yeah, that's
but
the
actually,
hardware.
yeah, exactly. But the real investment is in the people.
Yeah, yeah.
And so for me, that's a really important part, that we should always keep our focus on that.
Yeah.
And I'm very conscious with age that I'm very conscious of like, who are the people who are coming after me? You know,
next
where are they?
generation, yeah.
Have they picked it up? Are they learning? Do they know what to do? Showing them the ropes of what needs to be done. And
Yes.
also giving them space to grow.
So let's talk about the next generation and young Muslims. Obviously, you know, in current times, it's quite challenging for them to kind of navigate British society as well as you know, their faith. Sometimes there's conflict and so on. What's the message that we can kind of give to our young people?
I think for young people, if we focus on people who attend the mosques,
Yeah.
or even those who don't, one thing we have to recognize, and I've said this before as well, is that we have to understand that young people of today are very different to the young people we were,
Yeah,
or even the generation in between, right? Is it Gen Z now, is it?
Gen Z, yeah.
Yeah, Gen Z. Okay, so they have different challenges.
Yeah.
They're living in an era of rampant social media,
Yeah.
and also the challenges they face in the kind of just general living, like, you know, the cost of living, in surviving. You know, people can't buy properties, they
Yeah.
can't do all kinds of things.
Yeah,
They're
they can't
limited.
even rent.
They're
This-
very constrained
yeah.
in what they can do.
Yeah.
So how can we help them? And I
Yeah.
think as a mosque, what we can do is, I mean, it's, for me, it's about generally, I've always taken the view is to give people, young people, space and time. You know, not to judge them all the time.
Yeah.
And we should be made aware of the context of what they're living in,
Yeah.
and help them to grow, to flourish. And when I say about space and opportunity, is creating those opportunities. Because I used to always hear, we should always have young people, we should always have young
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
So, you know, in our organizations
Yeah,
and in our mosques, yes, we should. But it should be done in a way which actually helps them to grow. It shouldn't be a tick box exercise.
Yeah.
But it also shouldn't be a complete takeover.
Yeah.
Because I even when I was in MCB, I saw myself in a way, I'm a kind of a bridge between the elders and the youth
Okay. Yeah.
at the time. And it was like, I respect my elders and I took advice from them because of their experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, I also want to bring in young people
Yeah.
because they need to bridge that gap
Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause that's
for
the
that
future, right?
for the
Yeah.
continuity. Because we're not going to be here forever.
Yeah.
So we have to create an environment where we have that kind of continuous growth of people
Yeah.
that follow the path. And I think sometimes it almost becomes like a kind of narrative that there's too many old people around, you know, they've been there too long. In some instances, yes, that is the case, but we shouldn't disown them
Yeah.
as well, and that's the wrong attitude. And what we need to find is a way of bridging that gap between young and old.
I think that kind of succession planning.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah, and again, that's another.
crucial.
I mean, it's a term you hear, but nobody actually does anything about it.
Yeah.
So how do we make it happen?
How do we make it happen? I
You
mean,
know, this is the
that's-
key.
Yeah.
And I think things happen. I did focus a lot, especially when I was in MCB, around vision. Was one. So there's a well-known proverb, like, you know, that a vision without a plan is a nightmare, right?
Yeah.
And if you, I forgot the exact term, but basically you get the gist. So you can
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
vision, but if you don't make any plans for it,
Yeah.
you're not going anywhere. And if you set out on a plan without a vision, then it becomes a nightmare.
Yeah.
So there have to be clear objectives and goals in whatever you do, whether it's the mosque, whether it's a community, or even your work. There has to be a clear objective where you want to go and how you're going to get there.
Looking ahead, what are your hopes and visions for the Muslim community in the UK, especially in terms of representation, combating Islamophobia? What more can we do? What more can the mosque do?
Yeah, I think, I mean, for the UK, that's too big for me.
Yeah.
I think from the mosque perspective and from a community perspective, alhamdulillah, I think, like I've said, we've taken a path which has really got us somewhere quite substantial in the sense as an institution and with our congregation and our volunteers. There's no question about that. And what we should be really focusing on is some of the things I've already said, is how do we, almost like a lessons learned kind of experience, that there should be very clear plans about where we go from here. Because I remember the term, when LMC was opened, the strapline was vision becomes reality.
Yeah.
I don't remember that, right?
I do.
And then the focus was really about so we did go further in that sense. The building did. So Mariam Center came up and the mosque has continuously been expanding.
Yeah.
But now we've got to a point where you can't really go anywhere else, right? And we've got enough, alhamdulillah. And in another mosque that I was involved with, I said something about 10, 15 years ago, and I said, we should stop. We hadn't built anything. And I said, we've got the footprint. We don't need to do anything else. The ground footprint.
Yeah.
We should focus on the future.
Yes.
We should set the vision and go where we need to. Let's think ahead, 10 years ahead, right? 10, 15 years. And I think that kind of deep thinking needs to happen.
Yeah.
I can't give you an answer here and now. But some of the elements that I mentioned, I think we can definitely build in. We have a huge talent pool out there in our community. We just need to open the door for them and say, come and do. And they want to. They want to. We just need to create that space.
Yeah.
I think we face challenges if we become too insular.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to avoid. And I think, alhamdulillah, I have to say, East London Mosque is very different to a lot of mosques in that sense, because even from a young age, it's been a diverse mosque.
Yeah.
Whichever way you look at it, the congregation, the people that are around here, from the groups of communities that have passed through the doors on a local level, whether you talk about Somali community or you talk about North African communities, we grew up with them. It was normal for us. We weren't just, even though people may perceive it to be Bangladeshi predominantly, but it was an open mosque to everyone.
The doors are open.
The doors were open. The mosque was accessible. There was never any feeling of, I'm not welcome here.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes you can get that sense if you go to particular communities. That's more to do with the local population.
Yeah.
But East London Mosque, being where it is, has been very much open and diverse from the beginning, alhamdulillah.
Well, I guess this conversation leaves food for thought, really, because there's a lot of work to do, especially around attracting talent and getting individuals to become active in our community and to give back to our community. So I guess we need to carry on the conversations and then actually plan to do the work, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Brother Harun Rashid Khan. Thank you for your time. Jazakallah khair to you, the viewers, for watching. If you like this episode, please do like, follow, and share this video. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.